Welcome back to another episode of It's All Clutter. I have been podcasting mostly over on Ask a Clutter Boss, our weekly decluttering advice show, but I am back over here to dive deeper into certain topics. So tune in both to Ask a Clutter Boss to get your decluttering questions answered, and then we'll do deep dives over on the It's All Clutter channel into topics that keep coming up. So this topic has come up so many times in so many different forms on the Ask a Clutter Boss podcast, and it's all about electronic records, identity theft, switching from paper records to electronic records, how many paper records, how long should I keep my paper records for? All of these questions just keep coming up. So I have been doing a little bit more research. I want to just talk about how identity fraud happens, different ways that you can keep yourself safe. Does it make sense to have backup paper records or backup electronic records? And how do you even navigate this whole thing? When we think about paper versus electronic records, we're very committed to this idea that we need to keep a lot of paper records. The reason that we believe this is because this is what we were taught back in the day, and not that long ago. I mean, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and for all of time before that, there were only paper records. So yes, you needed to keep your paper records to validate every transaction. I mean, if anybody challenged a transaction, you had to have a paper record to prove that that transaction occurred, didn't occur, the amount, you had to have the paper record. With the advent of electronic records, we don't need paper records quite as much anymore. Now, in certain circumstances, yes, you definitely need to keep your paper records, but in most circumstances, you do not need to hang on to your paper records. You can rely on your electronic records. And then we get into this whole big discussion. How do I store electronic records? Are my electronic records safe? Do I want to have all of my information out there? There's no easy answers here. And as always, I urge you to prioritize your sanity first and foremost. If you come up with a complex system for paper records or electronic records or both, that's going to be very hard to maintain that system. Having to file papers in and of itself is extremely challenging. I mean, how many of us have stacks and stacks of papers waiting to be filed? The more complex our filing system, the more difficult it is to maintain that system, and the more likely it is that we're not going to maintain it. With electronic records, it is the same thing. The more complex the system, the number of steps or clicks or things that you have to remember, the more likely you're not going to maintain that system. When it comes to big collections of records, we want to really focus on searchability. The more that we can search, especially electronically, our records, the easier it is. It's much easier to have searchability on an electronic system than it is on a paper system because of the nature of computers. So I tend to use a very simple system for all of my paper records that I want to hang on to. I just email myself a copy of them, and then I can search my email. For my photographs, I use Google Photos because it's the best for searchability. Google is by and large the best for searchability. And depending on the size of the collection that you have, it's free or it's a very nominal fee each month. So for electronic records, I recommend Google just for finding your records. Now, what about keeping your records safe? I have a lot of clients that don't want to have their information online because they have safety concerns. And I understand this, but I also want to talk a little bit more in depth about the safety concerns of having electronic records. Whether or not you choose to have your records online, your records are digitized. So your records are electronic, whether you choose to access them electronically or not. If you choose to access your records electronically, if you choose to look at your credit card statements online, if you choose to access any records online, you do open a little window to fraud, but it's not exactly as you think. Fraud does happen through major breaches of databases, whether encrypted or not. If your information is in someone else's database, whether or not you're accessing it, and there is a breach in that in that database, your information is going to be stolen. That is one way that information is stolen. But let's kind of dive into a little bit more of how else our information gets stolen. And for the most part, I'm going to read off some things that I found doing some research, but for the most part, it's trickery. Like, you are tricked into giving somebody your information. It is not that they were able to access your stuff just because it was online. It was that they were able to trick you. And that is how your information is stolen if it's not stolen through a data breach. Let's just go through the top 11 ways identity theft can happen. And there's some terms here that were new to me and maybe new to you. The first one is phishing. So I think we've all heard of phishing emails. So scammers will use phishing emails and make it look like you're getting an email from a trusted institution like a bank or a credit card. They'll ask you to click a link and provide your login information, but it's not a real link, and you just gave a scammer your login information. So that is one thing to be aware of. In general, most organizations are never going to ask you out of the blue, give them your login information. That just is not a thing. Be very wary of any email that you choose to open or click on. Just don't. If you get an email from your bank and you're like, why is my bank emailing me? Call your bank and say, did you send me an email? Yes or no? Probably they'll be able to tell you right away if it's a scam or not. Smishing, new word to me. Smishing is when scammers target you via text message. It's very similar to phishing. They text you a link. It looks like it's coming from a legitimate website. I get these all the time from UPS, right? Like your package is going to be delivered or your package can't be delivered or something like that. But it's not from a UPS address. It's from a variation of a UPS address. We get tons of text messages. Our phone numbers are in massive databases. And even if your phone number isn't out there, computer programs can send out text messages and just keep changing up the phone numbers. Like, they can go through a million different iterations of a phone number, whether or not your phone number is in a database somewhere or not. Technology is not working in our favor in that case. But in general, don't click on any links that you get via text message that you're not expecting to get. Like, if you signed up for promotions on your favorite shopping website and you get a text message, yeah, that makes sense. That's probably from the place that you just gave them your information. But if you randomly get a text message about something you're not really sure what it's about, just delete it. Mark it as spam. Don't open it, or swipe to delete. I don't know how it works on an Android. That's smishing, phishing, smishing. And how about this one? Vishing. So vishing is when you get a fraudulent phone call, and the phone call come from somebody who says that they have information or they need your information. I know that one of the big scams right now, because it happened to my parents, and I know of several other people that it's happened to, where somebody gets a phone call and it's like, your grandchild is in trouble, and they put somebody on the phone who sounds like your grandchild who's actually in trouble, but your grandchild is not in trouble. It's not your grandchild. Information like this is taken from social media. So I think it's somewhat ironic that we may feel hesitant to use electronic records, but we have no problem putting all of our personal photos and stuff like that onto social media. Social media, not secure, for your personal information. A lot of times a vishing call will come from a phone number that looks recognizable. It's going to have your area code. It's going to be a town near you. It's just tech. Once again, it's somebody fraudulent using tech to their advantage. Phishing, smishing, vishing. You got to be careful for all of those things. And the best thing that you can do in these scenarios to keep yourself safe is not to not have your information out there, because they're getting the information from you. They're tricking you into giving you the information. It's to be super wary of any link that is sent to you. If you get a phone call and it makes you panic because somebody is in trouble or there's a problem, but it sounds a little off, do not give your information out. Do not offer to give anyone money. I think that when my parents got the phone call about my niece, she was in jail and needed $15,000 bail, something like that. It sounds ridiculous, But when you're on the end of the line and you think that your child or grandchild is in trouble, it's so hard to apply reason to that situation. So just take a deep breath. If you get a phone call that causes you to panic, but it also sounds really strange or it's not lining up quite right, take a deep breath and try and get somebody else to listen in on the phone call, or don't give any money, any bank information, nothing. Just don't do that. The next thing here, fake websites. My daughter fell prey to this. She got an ad on Instagram. Sounds like you think, oh, an ad on Instagram, a legitimate business. It was not. It was for Stanley Cups for $9.99. And this was like a scam that lasted for months. She sees this ad on Instagram for Stanley Cups. We know the Stanley Cup craze. She clicks on it. She buys a Stanley Cup with her credit card for $9.99. She sends the link to her friend. She says, go check this out, cheap Stanley Cups. Her friend is like, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like the Stanley Cup website. She places this order and she gets a tracking number and everything. And this tracking number is coming from China. She's tracking this Stanley Cup for months and ultimately ends up getting a little note in the mail that says, don't worry, your order is still coming. And at that point, of course, it's so long from when she placed the order. The scammers got her money. There was never anything coming. I think they sent like a bookmark or something. It was so bizarre. But fake websites, if you put your information into a fake website, they can steal it, or they can just steal your money because it's a fake website, but they're made to look like real websites. So it could be like Macy's.com, but it's not really Macy's. There's like another little thing in there. Or StanleyCup.com. It's not really Stanley Cup. It's whatever it is. Just be very careful of clicking through to websites. If you want to be shopping online, type in the website into your browser. That is the best thing to do. And if you're clicking on links from social media, those are typically something to be a little wary about. Like, that's not the best place to be shopping from in terms of getting your information stolen. Impersonation scams, that's basically when you meet somebody, you think that you know them, they develop trust, you develop like a trusted relationship with them, and then they scam you out of money. Be careful of that one. Data breaches, we talked about that. Data breaches are the intentional or unintentional release or theft of information due to cybersecurity or improper disposal of physical documents, all that stuff. Skimming. So skimming is another interesting one. That is when you swipe your credit card and there is an electronic thing installed on the credit card machine that is taking all the information that is being swiped. So even, we worry so much about having our information online, but just using a credit card can trigger your information being stolen. Now, usually it's just your credit card number, and when you have a fraudulent thing on your credit card, you're not liable for it. So you don't have to pay that, but it is a pain in the neck. So just, there's so many ways that people can get your information. So just be aware of them. Check your credit card statement. If your credit card company calls you and asks you to verify charges, make sure you're not giving them any of your personal identifying information. Public Wi-Fi networks and USB charging stations are another place where scammers can get into your phones and get information. So just be careful if you're on a public Wi-Fi. Make sure it's encrypted. The purchase of information on the dark web. The dark web, I don't know where it is or how to get there. Sounds like a scary place. And it seems to be where lots of information is purchased. So if there is a database that was breached, the information is then sold. The contact information, the information from that database is sold on the dark web. There's an interesting statistic here. 51% of new account fraud victims state that they personally knew the individual who committed the fraud. So friends and family can get into your information. I also read about people going to open houses and going through drawers and desks and stuff like that and getting information that way. Electronic records can be a concern, but there's so many ways that scammers can get your information. So what can you do? What can you do to protect yourself? I think number one, be aware that there's scammers at every twist and turn who are trying to get you to give them information. Don't give out your information ever to anyone who seems even slightly suspicious. Don't click on links. Don't open emails. I know that we have this like FOMO, like we're afraid we're missing a really important email or something looks really critical. If we can just put a little break in between us and that FOMO, we don't have to click on everything. We don't have to open every email. If it looks scammy, just delete it. You're not missing out on anything. If somebody really needs to get in touch with you, if they truly, genuinely need your information or need to give you a message, they will contact you multiple times in multiple different ways. Do not worry. If somebody really needs you, they will get in touch with you. So make sure your phones and computers have the latest software updates. Oftentimes, those software updates that are put out, they have security updates built into them. So when it says, do you want to update your phone right now? Click yes, do that. Update your phone, because a lot of times it's for a security reason. Turn on two-step verification for your accounts. That means that when you try and log into an account, it will send you a text message and you have to respond to the text message. Back up your data. So use cloud-based systems to have your data backed up. If you have photos and stuff like that on your computer and hackers get into your computer because you clicked the link in your email, make sure that your photos are all backed up onto the cloud so that you can access them. It's not all on a hard drive. You can use password managers. You want to have passwords that are hard to crack. If you have a hard time remembering your password, you can use a password manager, which is basically an app or a website that you log into, and it stores all of your password information. So you can create crazy passwords. You don't have to remember them. You just need to remember the one password to get into LastPass, or there's a lot of different ones out there. In general, in conclusion, there's a lot of different ways that scammers can get your information, but choosing to keep lots of paper records instead of using digital records doesn't make a ton of sense, because you're still putting information out there somewhere. Your information still is out there somewhere. So just be super aware that anything from posting on Facebook to logging into your bank account to having an open house at your house and having people go through your stuff can result in your information being compromised. It makes the most sense to stay up to date on the most current scams and just be really wary about everything that you are clicking on. Everything. Text messages, phone calls that you're not really so sure about, emails, all of that stuff can be a potential scam. And just, if you have a weird feeling in your gut about something, go with it. Trust your gut. And that is a good way to stay safe in this crazy digital world that we live in. I hope this information was helpful. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever heard of phishing, vishing, smishing, kabishing, willishing? What's the next one going to be? Stay safe out there and tune in to our next episode of It's All Clutter. Have a great day, everyone.